Um, so next, we're gonna move on, and thank you for the link, Stephen. We're gonna move on to our next speaker, Larry from Alcoholics Anonymous. So you can unmute yourself, Larry.
Thank you, LaTanya. My name's Larry. I'm an alcoholic. And
Larry.
thank you. I'm honored to be here to speak this afternoon on behalf of Alcoholics Anonymous and Tree of Hope. And thank you, LaTanya and Ed, Bunny, whatever you call yourself these days. I call you Ed. But thank you for all the hard work that you guys put in. This is like a nonstop gig for you guys. And thank you so much for all that you do in the community. My name is Larry. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is June 24th of 2000. And my home group is the Recovery on the Mountain group in Frederick, Maryland. We meet at 9:30 a.m. via Zoom every Saturday morning. It's a 1-hour meeting, and it's a step meeting. We discuss a step or a group of steps, and we share about our experiences with that step or anything that's conducive to recovery. So when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know anything about it. I'm what they call a first-timer. At least I have not felt the desire to go out and drink again since I've gotten sober. I originally got sober at Rockville Metro Club, 7 a.m. meeting, and I still give a shout out to that meeting because it meant the world to me at the time. And I tried some other meetings before going there, and I just couldn't relate. That probably wasn't their problem. That was my problem. I remember getting my first resentment in AA with an AA group because they wouldn't call on me to share. I would raise my hand and nobody was calling on me to share, but everybody else was sharing. It was the Argyle group. And the icing on the cake for that resentment was she was sharing about having to trade her Mercedes in on an Impala. And I didn't realize at the time, but what she was basically talking about, how the quality of her problems had changed. She had a car. I didn't know where my next meal was coming from that day. I got sober in a homeless shelter system in Montgomery County. I spent a few weeks in what they call the big house now. And at that time, they didn't have the big house. It was a single wide trailer that sat 36 of us on gym mats. The gentleman that ran that shelter was, his name was Jim B. And Jim was in recovery. I think he was 19 years sober at the time, that he kind of took me under his wing. And back in 2000, you didn't give people your cell phone numbers, but when I left that shelter in the morning, he would give me his number, ask me that if I ran into any problems or I needed to talk, just give him a call. They didn't have unlimited plans back then with cell phones, so I'm kind of dating myself. I got sober at the age of 44. I drank for 31 years before getting sober. I was 13 when I started drinking on a regular basis. I had drank before then. I had gotten drunk before then. But 13 years old was the day that I started, or the year that I started drinking on a daily basis. Drugs are part of my story, so I used drugs on a daily basis, and I was basically what you would consider a human garbage can. Alcohol has always been my drug of choice, but I've done the methamphetamines, I've done the black beauties, I've done, as James was talking, I believe it was James that was saying that I would snort coke to stay up, and then I would take something else to go down. And alcohol was usually a good downer for me because it is a depressant. I didn't realize that. Why would a depressed person want to drink a depressant? But that's what I did. So a little bit about Alcoholics Anonymous and how this thing has worked for me. Alcoholics Anonymous, is the founder's day for AA is 6/10 of 1935. That's the founding day of Alcoholics Anonymous. That date is significant because there are two co-founders of AA. There's Bill Wilson and there's Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob's sobriety date is also June 10th of 1935. Founders Day and Dr. Bob's anniversary date are the same because this was the date that one alcoholic took the message to another alcoholic, and both of them had a desire to stop drinking, and they both kept each other sober. Dr. Bob lived for another 30 years after getting sober. In 11 years, he sponsored over 5,000 people. Sponsorship back then is not what sponsorship is today. Sponsorship back then is the way I sponsor people today. Not quite as rigorous as Dr. Bob did, but back in those days, they took people through the 12-step process in a day or two. They didn't wait a month or two or a year or two to get through the 12 steps before you got to step 4. They took people through the steps quickly. When I got sober, I got a sponsor by the name of Jeff T. He was my sponsor then. He's still my sponsor. He's been sponsoring me the entire time that I've been sober. Jeff immediately took me out to his van after a meeting when I identified with his story, when he was sharing about a crime that he had committed, which involved embezzlement, and how he had been disbarred as an attorney, how he had lost his wife, lost his home, nearly lost his son, and almost went to prison. Everything that Jeff was talking about at that time was my story, except I guess I got away with it 3 times more than he did. I had been convicted on embezzlement 3 times, and I had another embezzlement charge that was coming down to court. And the irony is, I've had the same probation officer every single time. Even that 4th time, when it came down the pipe, same probation officer, Claire Joppi. And I had the same judge every single time, Judge McGuckian, every time. And I remember when I got it convicted on the 3rd count, I committed embezzlement back in 1996. I got a slap on the wrist with probation. I committed embezzlement again in 1997. And it was about a week after coming off of probation for the one in 1996. And before I could come off probation for 1997, I committed another crime of embezzlement. I guess I wasn't that smart because I kept getting caught. Or maybe, I don't know, I'd done this for many years before getting caught, but it all seemed to come down the pipe at the same time, right around each other, right after each other. And so when Judge McGuckian convicted me to, he gave me 6 months in 7 locks. And I ended up spending 3.5 months in 7 locks. And I had convinced everybody that I knew that I was taking a leave of absence and that I was working out of town, and everybody bought it, or seemingly they bought it. And for 3.5 months, I spent time in 7 locks. And when I came out, I picked up right where I left off. And Judge McGuckian had told me, if I catch you in my courtroom ever again, I'm going to give you all the time you've got coming. And this was the 3rd strike, if you will, of a capital offense, of an embezzlement charge, the same crime. So essentially, I was a 3-time loser, and I should have gotten a lot more time than what I did. But I spent my first year of sobriety in a homeless shelter. I went through Chase Partnership out on Goody Drive, and I went through the outpatient addiction program that's sponsored by Montgomery County. And I learned a lot about myself. I went through the 12 steps, and I turned myself in about 6 months into recovery for the crime that I had committed before getting sober. And at the end of my first year of sobriety, which happened to be on my exact date, June 24th of 2001, I celebrated my first year anniversary at Rockville Metro Club at a Sunday celebration meeting. And the day afterwards, I went before Judge McGuckian yet again, where he was going to tell me what my life was going to look like over the next few years. He ended up, I had a 5-year plea agreement on the table with a public defender. And he chastised the prosecution for settling for that 5 years. He chastised me, he chastised the public defender. And when he finished chastising everybody about that 5 years, he gave me 3. I thought he made a mistake, but he gave me 3. And the entire time that I was in the Department of Corrections, I thought that they were going to come back and say we meant 5, but that didn't happen. I enrolled into the RSAT program. I had been going to at least a meeting every day, except that period of time that I was locked up for the crime that I had coming down the pipe. And so when I went to prison, I had wanted to pick up recovery where I left off. So I enrolled in this program called RSAT, Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Program out in Sykesville. And I was accepted into the program. I had no idea that once I completed the program that I became eligible for parole. So I became eligible and I got out of prison after 11.5 months. instead of spending the 3 years in the Department of Corrections in Maryland, I ended up spending 11 and a half months in prison. I came out and got engaged in the same community that I was involved in. I went back to my home group. My sponsor had sponsored me throughout the time that I had been in Sykesville. And something miraculous happened. I learned so much about him that I had not. Up until then, he was my sponsor. When he was sponsoring me, he was carrying me through the 12 steps. I was done with the 12 steps, or I was done going through the first process of it. I was engaged in incorporating all of this in my life and trying to understand it all, but he had carried me through the 12 steps after about 5 months. And he knew that I was in danger, so he immediately got me through the first 3 steps, started me on my 4th step, my 5th step. I sat down and I talked with him. We spoke for 9 hours while I went through 13 pages on the front, 13 pages on the back of people that I had resentments with and people that ultimately I would end up having to make amends to. And as I got through the 12-step process, I started to understand recovery around the midsection of step 9. A lot of people talk about this awakening that they had in 4 and 5, but the awakening for me was actually in step 9. I learned over the time that, step 1 is great for getting us into the rooms of AA. And as I look back on it now and realize what I didn't know then, why would I want to stay in step 1, as a lot of people do? Why would I want to stay there for a week, for a month, for a year working on step 1? If I really examine step 1 right now, my life had become unmanageable and I'm powerless over the alcohol. Those are the 2 pieces of step 1. Admitted that I was powerless over alcohol, that my life had become unmanageable. And when I look back now, there's nothing but bad news in that step. Why in the world would I want to stay there? And so when I sponsor people, I sponsor them exactly the way my sponsor sponsored me. We don't stay stuck on step 1. We get through 1, 2, 3 right away. We get on step 4. And if you don't write out an inventory list for the next 2 weeks as I'm meeting with you, because when I sponsor people, I meet with them every week until we get through these 12 steps. And if you haven't done step 4 by the time we meet for that 3rd time, we're going to schedule a time where we're going to do 4 and 5 together, because that's the way that it was done back in the 1930s and 1940s. They did them together. And the person that was being sponsored was too shaky to write. So the sponsor wrote, and the person that's being sponsored talked. So if we haven't done step 4 by the 3rd week that we're working together, we're going to do 4 and 5 together. You're going to talk, I'm going to write. And I'm going to immediately get you onto your 8-step list so that you can start making amends, because that's where the relief was for me. I don't know if I'd be alive today if my sponsor hadn't taken me through these steps quickly. And when I sponsor people, I assume that they have the same issues that I had, and that they may be thinking about crossing a street in traffic at 45, 55 mile per hour traffic while I'm walking across the street. There's an intersection at Avery Road where it meets Norbeck. Avery Road Treatment Center is at somewhere about maybe about a quarter of a mile down Avery Road. And there's a traffic light at that intersection, and I would get off of the bus in the morning trying to make my way over to Avery Road to see if they were going to accept me into their treatment program. But I would wait until the light turned green and cars start driving down the highway, and I would just step across the street, 4 lanes of traffic. Let's see what's going to happen. Let's see if this will be the day. So I wasn't really interested in killing myself personally. I was too much of a coward for that. I took the sort of passive approach to suicide. Let's see what will happen today when I cross the street. I never got hit, but there were a lot of near misses. A lot of people cursing at me, a lot of people upset because I'm crossing the street. I assume that everybody is in the same frame of mind when they come into recovery. And so my objective is to get people through the 12 steps right away. And particularly getting through step 9 before we get to that 3rd month process, because somewhere around 90 days, I start developing the idea that I really don't need AA anymore. My life's starting to go a little bit better now. I don't really need to go through all these steps. I don't really need to go to all these meetings either. Matter of fact, if I wasn't in this homeless shelter, I wouldn't go to these meetings at all. So I think it's essential to get people through those steps before they get to the 3-month or 90-day mark where they start feeling like, I don't really need this anymore. I assume everybody that I sponsor thinks like I do. And that the process of recovery and the process of the addiction was the same for them as it was for me, because we are more alike than we are different. So the miraculous thing that happened in my sponsor, in the relationship between my sponsor and I, you know, we talk about practicing these principles in all of our affairs. It's nearly impossible for a person, for me to sponsor someone and not develop a friendship with them along the way. That's just the nature of AA. That's the nature of practicing these principles in all our affairs. That's the nature of the bond that we share. I can't sponsor a person without ultimately becoming their friend along the way. I didn't realize my sponsor had become my friend until he started making arrangements when he started coming to visit with me while I was in prison. Then he started making arrangements for him to pick up my kids and bring them to see me. By the time I hit my bottom, and this is my bottom, everybody's got to have one. Mine, the going to prison was not a big deal. The going to jail was not a big deal. The potential embarrassment in the community was not a big deal for me. All of these things I could recover from. The big deal for me is just before getting sober, May 19th, I got my first DWI. Never had a moving violation before that. May 21st, I got my second DWI, 2 days later. In the process of getting that second DWI, I was attempting to throw a gallon of paint through my ex-wife's patio window. And she wasn't very happy about it. And because she wasn't happy, she called the police, and the police showed up, handcuffed me, manhandled me, threw me in the back of the police car. Probably wouldn't have bothered me so much, except my children were standing across the parking lot watching the whole thing unfold. And they were just crying and boo-hooing and screaming. And I think for the first time, I realized what my life had diminished to, that I had become a person that my children couldn't be proud of. Never mind the fact that, you know, I was Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type alcoholic. Some days I'd come home and I would be drunk. All days I'd come home and be intoxicated, drunk, really, by the legal standard. But some days I'd come home drunk and I'd be the happy drunk. Other days I'd come home drunk and I would be the mean drunk. And you know, my friends sometimes, you know, I've got a couple of friends that are in recovery, and they refer to that as when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. So when I would come home drunk, mean, people talk. Or when I would talk, my kids would be weighing out, is this going to be the happy drunk or is this going to be the mean drunk? If I was the mean drunk, everybody went to the rooms. Everybody went to the rooms. If I was the happy drunk, everybody carried on just like nothing had happened. And so the bottom for me was starting when I got the second DWI, my kids witnessed all of this. Judge Eugene Wolfe took my parental rights on that day. He declared me an unfit father, said I had no business being around these kids. And it took a while before I could get visitation with my children. At first, visits were an hour every other weekend, supervised by my ex-wife, the person that I probably hated the most. And then it became a unsupervised visitation where I would have them for 8 hours out of a day. And over a period of time before going to prison, I had visitations every other weekend. And I would take a break from the homeless shelter where I was living, rent a hotel room so that I could spend time with my kids, and I would take them back on Sunday to the shelter with me, and we would play basketball out on the basketball courts until my former wife came and picked them up. They were in tow with me as I was going to meetings during those weekends. I never missed a meeting, and they were always in tow with me. And it's kind of weird that as much as they saw about my bottom, and as much as they saw about the alcoholism, I've got 2 children that are in a program of AA now. And I was the person to 12-step them. What a miracle that is. So over a period of time, I got visitation rights for weekends at a time. And because I had those visitation rights, my sponsor wanted me to keep them. And so he would bring my children to visit with me every other weekend. On the weekend when I was supposed to have them as part of my visitation. He would drive down from Rockville Metro Club to Leesburg after 11 o'clock meeting on Sunday. He would drive down to Leesburg to pick them up, drive back through Rockville, drive up to Braddock, or drive up to Jessup, or drive over to Sykesville, whichever prison they had me in at a particular time. He would bring my kids to visit with me every other weekend. And he did it religiously, every weekend, with the exception of one. He did it religiously. He had become my friend and I didn't even know it. He had become my brother and I didn't even know it. He had become a surrogate father to my children and I didn't even know it. He had become the best person in my life. And it had developed out of adversity. So I love my sponsor today. I love him like he's a brother. And I know that there's nothing that he wouldn't do for me, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for him. When I was in prison, I had saved up some money to continue paying my $3,300 a month child support payments. And I left that money with him, every dime of it. I think I left about $58,000 with him. He spent every dime of it on child support, or he spent it on something for me as I requested. And when I got out, the little bit that was left, he had every dime of it accounted for. A disbarred attorney who had been convicted of embezzlement had every dime of it accounted for. My sponsor to this day has keys to everything I got, combinations to everything I've got, passwords to everything I got. The only other person that has that is my wife. And my wife and I have been married now for 15 and a half years. Never had an argument with each other. Not even once. She's pissed with me right now. I don't know why, but I usually don't until she tells me. Sometimes she tells me, sometimes she doesn't, but she's upset with me right now. And when she gets away, I leave her alone. I used to try to force her to talk, and I learned over a period of time that the worst thing that I could do is try to force her to talk when she wasn't ready. She'll open up when she gets ready to. So she's at home, but I'm in my office. And when I leave here, I will go to visit with my grandchildren because my granddaughter's having her 3rd birthday. So my wife and I will meet over at my daughter's house to say happy birthday to her. My children are a part of my life, a very intricate part of my life. And it's all a result of the 12-step program of AA. It's all because of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Since I've been sober, I've started a business. And I really refer to it, it's almost like it's a nonprofit business because sometimes we don't make any money. Sometimes my clients are supposed to pay me, but they don't pay me. I've never taken a person to court because they didn't pay me. Sometimes I get people to come to me because the person that was responsible for me being in business sends them to me for help. It's funny, Don S., who was the treasurer of Rockville Metro Club for years, when I came out of prison, nobody wanted to hire a convicted felon. And particularly when they found out that the nature of the conviction was embezzlement, because at the time I was a CPA and I lost my certification. And over the last 5-6 years, if miracles don't exist, maybe you might consider this one. I wasn't going back for my certification because I could practice as an accountant without being certified. But the person that kept pushing me to get my certification said, whether I needed it or not, it was an unresolved issue in my past that needed to be resolved one way or the other. And that I should go back before the Board of Accountancy and recertify, put in an application for recertification. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then you tried. The person that suggested that I do that was my grand sponsor. And I don't mind sharing who he is and what he does because his anonymity was broken a long time ago. He started the Montgomery County Drug Court program. He's a recovering alcoholic, and his name is Nelson P. And so a judge wrote a letter to the Board of Accountancy for me to get my certification back. Not only did he write a letter of certification for me, a gentleman that I served on a panel with, who is also a judge, wrote a letter of recommendation for me. That judge was Eugene Wolf, the same guy that took my parental rights away from me. And he wrote a letter of recommendation for me. These are all good people in my life. The person that started me off in business hired me to come and get his books in order and to prepare tax returns for a business that he owned, an automotive business that he owned. Couldn't afford to pay me much, said, I can give you $800 a week and you give me whatever time that buys. And so I would paint houses during the day because that's what I was doing for a living, because another guy in recovery gave me a job painting houses. And I painted those houses with him until he couldn't afford to pay me anymore. He hired me not because he needed me, but because he was wanting to help me. One day, this guy, Don S., who owned this automobile shop, walks in while I'm working on his books. He lays a cell phone down and he writes a number down on the back of a card and he slides the cell phone over to me. And he says, this is a telephone number to this phone. And when my customers come in, I want you to go out and get some business cards printed up. And when customers come in, I want you to give every one of them one of these cards. And I want you to see if you can drum up some business for yourself. And so I did exactly what he suggested that I do. He paid for that cell phone for me for the next 6 months until I could afford to pay for it for myself, because I moved that business out of his auto mechanics shop and I moved it into my home. And in 2004, I incorporated that business, and it is still existing in Rockville, and we've opened up offices in McLean, Virginia, and Frederick, Virginia since then. And I've gotten my certification back because other people helped me. Everything that I have is because somebody helped me. I don't know why I'm so emotional today. I guess it's been a while since I've talked about these parts of my story and the people that were involved and how I came to be where I am today. But I can tell you this, with all the stuff that I've accumulated, and I've accumulated a lot of stuff, I would part with every bit of it if it stood in the way of my relationship with the people that are in my life. I would part with every bit of it if it stood in the way of my having peace of mind every day. I have no chaos in my life. I have no drama in my life. I don't argue with people. I am very direct with people, and sometimes it's offending to them, and sometimes people are direct with me. But there is no point in arguing about what another person believes in. I don't try to carry the message of AA to somebody that's drinking, because they don't have anything to say that I want to hear, and I don't have anything to say that they want to hear. So I usually wait until they stop drinking when they're desperate enough to maybe hear the message of AA. I sponsor a lot of people. I sponsor upward of maybe 400, 500 people. I carry the message to one person at a time on a day at a time. I used to sponsor people. I'd work with them at 5:30 Monday, work with another one on Tuesday, another one on Wednesday, another one on Thursday, another one on Friday. And I remember my wife saying to me, you know, when you're with your clients, you don't open the door, you don't answer the phone for anybody. When you're with the people you sponsor, you lock that door at 5:30, you don't open the door, you don't answer the phone for anybody. Nobody can get in touch with you. When you're with your children on the weekend, your phones are off. You don't answer the phone for anybody. You don't do any business on the weekend. And she said, when you're committed to these nonprofits that you're committed to, when you go to those nonprofits, you give them 2 hours of your time, 3 hours of your time, and you don't answer the phone when I call or anybody else. And she said to me, you give them 100%. Where's my 100%? So back in 2007, Friday night became my date night. I don't work with people I sponsor. LaTanya and Ed know very well, it's pointless to call Larry after 7 o'clock on Friday. Phones are off, emails off. There's no way that even my children can get in touch with me on Friday at 7 o'clock. It's a done deal. That's my date night. So that's her 100%. And as long as I give her 100%, she allows me to do the stuff that I do in the community. And not only does she allow it, but she supports it 100%. I couldn't do nearly what I do in the community if it wasn't for her. I couldn't do nearly what I do in the community if it wasn't for AA. And every time I have an anniversary, I remind people who come to that anniversary that I can't do what I do without supporting my wife at home. Bunny and LaTanya, that's why I love you guys so much, because you support each other in everything you do. But you better start taking a date night to yourselves so you can have that personal time, because it gets old after a while. I've got the most understanding wife in the world until she gets ticked off. Even then, I've got the most understanding wife in the world, but I better find some time for her or I'll lose her. So everything I've got is a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love AA. I still go to a meeting every day. I've never stopped going to a meeting every day. And I've never stopped being sober. I think is a direct result of not missing meetings, but not necessarily that's what's keeping me sober. I think it's that one-on-one work that I do with other alcoholics. Those 400 and 500 people that I sponsored. 4 people that I'm working with right now. Monday, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, one on Thursday. I have never not had 4 people that I'm working with in any given week. And that's what keeps me sober, because it reminds me as I take them through the steps, it takes me through the steps again. When I share my story with you as I do today, it gets me emotional sometimes, but it reminds me of what I used to be like, and reminds me of what I'm like today and how grateful I am, because, you know, most of the tears I shed these days, they're really out of gratitude. I'm grateful for the life that I have, and I can't wait to pass it on to other people. I wish all of my friends, all the people I know, could have the life that I enjoy today. But there's a lot of work that goes along with it. It's work that makes me feel good. And I really didn't want to do this meeting today. I didn't want to do this meeting because I'm cramped up on time. I'm going to be late for my daughter's birthday party, or my granddaughter's birthday party, but I had already committed to this. So I really didn't want to be here. But I've never gone to something where I was taking the message of AA and walked away feeling bad. I always feel good when I take the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I always feel good when I help other people. So because I feel good, I keep doing it. And I think I'll keep doing it and keep coming back. Thanks for letting me share. And thanks for inviting me, LaTanya. Thank you so much for the honor and privilege of being able to do this and to be a part of the Tree of Hope. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Larry. You know, I want to add that, Larry, you're amazing, but, you know, Tree of Hope, you know, we owe a lot of our success to the support of Larry. Like what other people did for Larry, he did for us. You know, he did our 501c3 application pro bono, and he's been with us every step of the way. Any kind of support that we've needed, he has been there. He does all our accounting. He's just an amazing individual. I can't even imagine the person you described in your story. You know what I mean? I was like, you always calm spirit.
Yes.
Ask my kids, they'll tell you quick.
Yes. You are a power example, man. Power example of recovery. Yeah.
Yes, and we truly appreciate you. You know, anybody have any questions? Oh, are there any virtual meetings now for AA there?
Oh yeah, I'll send you an address or it's Outlook that has a number of them in there.
Okay, all right. Okay, then cool. And all right, is there any questions for Larry or comments? All right.
Oh, I'll say one thing. My name is Daryl, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Daryl.
Great hearing you share as always, Larry. You know I love you, and I had the same experience that you, LaTanya, and Ed have. Larry's been a godsend in my life, so I could just keep going on with the Larry tribute, but I know he doesn't like that. So just so glad to hear you, Larry, and you know I love you, man. So I'm not sure what you guys do, LaTanya, but I am interested in learning. So, everyone have a blessed day.
All right, you too. You too.
All right.
Hi, Latonya. Hi, my name is Joseph, and I'm an addict. I would like to thank Larry. I had the privilege of being able to know him for a while, and I always enjoy hearing him speak. So thank you again, Larry, for that, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you, sir. And you too.
All right. Anyone else? All right, well, we're gonna try to get the AA link up here for the virtual meetings, so you guys can check out some AA meetings if you like. If you have it, Larry, you can, if it's a email, a website, you can put it in the chat. And